I'm very grateful for the opportunity to speak with you this evening, and I thank you for turning out in such impressive numbers. I'm on day 15 of this tour, homeward bound, Minneapolis, Chicago still to come, then back to Boston. My blazer is ready to disintegrate at this point. My second stop on the way, this is a wonderful independent bookstore. I am becoming an expert in independent bookstores. My second stop along the way was at a store called Politics and Prose, which is in Washington, D.C. I don't know if any of you have been there. It's owned by two remarkable women, not only devoted booksellers, but really terrific entrepreneurs. And the one, Barbara, who introduced me the other week, or whenever it was, mentioned that I had been at Politics and Prose for my previous book, The Limits of Power, and she liked it. And she told the people in the audience that that year, the year Limits of Power came out, she had given copies of the book to her various friends for Christmas gifts. And it occurred to me that this is the sort of thing that really ought to catch on with the reading public. So I don't know how many friends and relatives you give gifts to for Christmas or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or Labor Day or whatever, but you know, assuming that there must be at least 10 or 12 or a dozen intimate friends or relatives that you have, and if you would all consider giving them a copy of Washington Rules, you'll not only make the bookstore happy and my publisher happy, but you'll make me happy. So just a thought before we start. The way I prefer to do these things is to speak relatively briefly, hoping I can tell you enough about the book that will cause you to be interested in it without telling you so much about it that you'll say, okay, got that, let's go on to the next thing. But seriously, to speak briefly in order to allow opportunity for questions and discussion, because I really think that's the part that you like best. And to tell you the truth, it's the part I like best. So we can go back and forth a little bit. So I'm thinking I'll probably talk for not more than about 15 or 18 minutes, and then we can use the balance of the hour for your questions. So let me hop into this, the formal part of the text. Everybody, it seems to me, is talking about Afghanistan these days. Why are we in Afghanistan? Why were we in Vietnam? Two questions. In my judgment, one answer. We are there today, we were there then, because Washington stubbornly adheres to a national security consensus, an approach to national security policy consisting of two elements. The American credo defines purpose. The Sacred Trinity defines practice. The credo really is a claim. The credo summons the United States, and most emphatically the United States alone, to lead, save, liberate, and ultimately transform the world. According to the Sacred Trinity, which really describes the relationship of military power to that credo, according to the Sacred Trinity, the minimum essentials of international peace and order require the United States, and again we should emphasize emphatically the United States alone, to first maintain a global military presence. Second, to configure its armed forces not to defend the country, but to provide instruments of global power projection. And third, to marry this global military presence with these global power projection capabilities to support a pattern of global interventionism. Together, Credo and Trinity constitute the essence of the way that Washington has attempted to govern and police what many people have called the American century. The Trinity lends plausibility to the Credo's vast claims. The Credo, in turn, justifies the Trinity's vast requirements and vast exertions. Together, they define the rules to which Washington adheres and has adhered since the beginning of the Cold War over 60 years ago. And they also determine the precepts by which Washington attempts to rule. Yet there's a problem. And the problem is that the rules don't work. At least they don't work any longer. I myself believe that I can make the case that when this approach to national security policy was forged in the wake of World War II, at the very beginning of the Cold War, that it actually did make a certain amount of sense. I think you can make the case that in the early days of the Cold War, in the late 40s through the 1950s, adherence to the Washington rules may well have contributed to our security and contributed to our prosperity. But the world that existed then has long since vanished, and the Washington rules have proven to be counterproductive, something that events since 9/11 have made increasingly apparent. Promising American safety and security, the Washington rules have produced something akin to permanent war. We need to recognize the significance of the fact that we now live in a society in which the vast majority of us have come to accept war as, in essence, a normal condition. Promising to preserve the American way of life, the Washington rules have set the United States on a course toward bankruptcy, both fiscal bankruptcy and, at least as troubling, moral bankruptcy. So what should replace the Washington rules? Well, in my view, we should replace the existing American credo with a new credo, reviving the conviction that America's primary purpose and obligation is to be America, fulfilling the aspirations expressed in our founding documents. Not least among those aspirations, the closing words of the preamble of the Constitution of the United States declares that the purpose of this union is to, quote, secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. And I think the word in that expression that most demands our attention today is the word posterity. I would argue that securing the blessings of liberty for ourselves, in that regard, much work remains to be done. But to secure the blessings of liberty for our posterity, that's an obligation that it seems to me increasingly we've simply forgotten and have abandoned. Now, there are those who will hear the words that I have just spoken and say, well, obviously he's an isolationist whose only interest is in turning his back on the world, raising the drawbridges, and ignoring everybody else. Not the case. I would argue, however, that to the extent that America has a mission to the world at large, the United States would be best served, and the world would be best served, if we attempted to fulfill that mission by serving as an exemplar for others, rather than imposing liberal values on the people of Iraq or the people of Afghanistan.